Hello everyone, welcome to Within the Frame. I'm Kim Bo-kyung. Despite global leaders' warnings, Israel has continued to launch intensive airstrikes and artillery barrages in Rafah, where more than half of Gaza's population is seeking refuge. This came after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rejected Hamas's terms for a ceasefire. But even after that, the U.S. and Jordan are reportedly still discussing a possible truce deal. Meanwhile, tensions are escalating in the Middle East, with some people worrying over the possibility of a full-scale conflict between the U.S. and Iran. While Washington deals with constant missile attacks by Houthis and other Iranian-backed groups, Tehran is maintaining pressure on these militia groups to achieve its own objectives. How do experts see the intensifying clashes across the region? To answer this, we have invited Professor Shin Sang-yup from Kyung-hee University. Welcome to the show, Professor Shin.
Thank you.
And we also have Dr. Aidan Hehir from the University of Westminster. Good to see you again, Dr. Hehir.
Good to see you too. Thanks for having me.
All right, Dr. Hehir, before we talk about Israel's planned incursion into Rafah, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu previously rejected Hamas's ceasefire counter-proposal. Now, what were the details of the truce offer, and why did Netanyahu reject this?
Well, basically, the peace offer from Hamas had three different phases. In the first phase, which would last 45 days, all Israeli women hostages and all men under the age of 19, plus all the old and sick, would be released in exchange for Palestinian women and children held in Israeli jails. And then the second phase would begin after talks, and the remaining male hostages, Israeli hostages, would be released, and Israel would withdraw from Gaza, essentially. And in the third phase, the remains of the dead would be exchanged on both sides. But as you noted, this was rejected by Netanyahu. And I think one of the reasons for that is because he is at the moment so far into the conflict that really, from his point of view, there is no turning back. There was about 240 hostages taken by Hamas. 31 of them have been released, but which is a very small number and causing huge disquiet in Israel. Israel has managed to rescue 3 hostages, but it has killed more hostages than it has rescued. And this is leading to huge backlash against Netanyahu in Israel. So he has concluded, evidently, that the only way for him to survive politically is to achieve what he's described as absolute victory. So in many respects, what we're witnessing here is not a clash between Israel and Palestine, but it's a battle on behalf of Netanyahu's political career, which unfortunately
all right, I see. Well, Dr. Hehir, apparently we are losing connection right now, unfortunately. So we are going to talk to Professor Shin first and then come back to our Dr. Hehir once the connection is okay. All right. Well, Professor Shin, it seems like Dr. Hehir pointed out that it was political survival that Netanyahu chose over the ceasefire plan. Right. And after rejecting such a proposal, Israel targeted Rafah, killing hundreds of people in strikes. And apparently the U.S. warned Israel, saying it is not going to support this action. Might Israel's decision in any way affect Washington's supportive policy?
Well, to answer your question, I think I had to edit up some more explanation what's happening in the relations between U.S. government and Israeli government. As you already said, that the USA government gave a kind of warning to Israeli government, particularly Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, right? And then USA government empathized protect the civilian lives over there. The USA government, the Mr. Biden said that, military operations, Israeli military operations in the Gaza is over the top. And actually, that was the hardest criticism USA has made toward Israel, which, as you know very well, Israel is one of the strong allies for the United States over the last several decades. And then the President Security Advisor, even he said that this is nothing which USA support. But by the way, the point is that despite of this kind of warning, Netanyahu, gave a comments to his military and the security officials to come up with the a combined plan, which is one plan is to destroy the Hamas forces in Rafah, which is one of the city in the southern part of Gaza. And then also he emphasized he ordered to come up with the plan, mass evacuation of civilians from the region. But the point is that the Israeli government, military already started attack. From the air, they launched the attack on the targets in the Rafah. Right. So I think that there must be some tensions in the relations between USA government and Israeli government. But because of this one, I cannot say that there will be a big changes of the USA's policy toward Israel. But if Israel keeps on their stance, carrying on their military operations in the region, particularly in the Rafah, because of that, there are heavy criticism from the international community, of course from the USA. It can be a quite burdensome on the USA government to keep their stance, supportive, the unconditional support for the Israeli government. So at least if situation goes on, then we can say some minor changes, and we cannot eliminate the possibility of minor changes of USA policy toward Israel.
All right, I see your point. Now, Dr. Hehir, are you back?
Yes, I hope so. Sorry about that.
No, it's totally fine. Dr. Hehir, could you briefly tell us what you were trying to say for the previous question, and then let's move on to the third question.
Sorry, yes. So I was making the point that Netanyahu rejected the peace deal, saying that he was going for absolute victory. And what we're witnessing now really is a battle for Netanyahu's political survival. It has, this isn't just about Israel, and it isn't just about Palestine. Netanyahu is proving himself to be a megalomaniac and willing to see thousands of people slaughtered just to preserve his own political career. So long as he is unable to demonstrate a strength and to maintain control over what's happening in Gaza, he feels the only way out is for him to have this complete victory over the Palestinians and to completely defeat Hamas. Now, the vast majority of strategic experts would suggest that it's not going to be possible to completely defeat Hamas unless you engage in mass atrocity crimes and try to effectively ethnically cleanse Gaza, but also engage essentially in genocide, which is what it seems to be Netanyahu's plan. So unfortunately, the capacity to reason with a man who is so far gone deep into a river of blood is greatly reduced. And the prospects for any peace deal, given Netanyahu's disposition, are greatly reduced.
All right, I see. Well, Dr. Hehir, we have been talking about how U.S. is going against Israel's decision, though there is no major change in its supported policy. But it's not just the U.S., Dr. Hehir. Global leaders are all warning against an Israeli offensive on Rafah, with Egypt saying it could lead to the suspension of a peace treaty, while Saudi Arabia saying there won't be a normalization of ties. Now, what might be the result of such pressure from around the world?
Well, all this is happening at a very difficult time for the United States, given that this is an election year, and that has a huge impact on U.S. foreign policy. The U.S. could essentially bring this conflict to an end tomorrow if it wanted to, if it completely drew back its support from Israel. But obviously, it's not going to do that in the context of an election year, because it would be seen to have abandoned an ally and a very important ally within America. That constituency support of Israel is very strong, particularly amongst conservatives. So that's not really an option. But likewise, this wavering that Biden is engaged in at the moment as you say, it's perpetuating this war, this massacre, and I think it is worth reiterating that what's happening in Palestine today is of generational magnitude. This is something that will affect how people think about the United States, about Israel, for many years to come. And in that context, what they're doing at the moment is essentially discrediting the US as a force for good in the world. Now, a lot of people would have believed previously that US support for Israel and US support for many other regimes around the world undermined their credibility as a force for good. But this, to me, is so clear cut, so conclusive that there's going to be no way back from it. And not just in terms of its reputation, as in the Middle East. These two are going to be severed by virtue of what the United States is doing.
All right, I see your point, Dr. Heher. Well, Professor Shin, let's shift our gears a little bit to this escalating tensions between Iran and the U.S. Now, the U.S. has retaliated for the January drone attack on American troops at a base in Jordan. But even amid such attacks, Iran still vowed to support this militia groups such as Hezbollah. But what is their intention?
Well, I think there are several intentions which the Iranian government has. But the number one intention is that, the reason why they provided the military aid and assistance to the militia groups in the region is let them attack USA continuously, and by giving a pressure to USA government, they firmly believe that USA soldiers could leave from the region. So this is, I think, number one, the intention. They do not want to have fight against USA directly. Of course, USA does not want to fight against Iran directly. So despite of this kind of series of attacks of these militant groups supported by the Iran against the American soldiers, American bases, and American military facilities, but certainly as I said before, the number one reason why Iran want to support these militant groups is to let them use as a way to make the USA government to change their policy toward the reason that means withdraw their soldiers from the Middle East.
All right. Well, Professor Shin, I have a different question here.
Yes.
Regarding this Iranian behavior, there are some voices, including those of former U.S. Vice President Mike Pence and former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, saying that the Biden administration needs to strike back against Iran because it needs to restore deterrence in that region. But as our Dr. Heher already pointed out, because the U.S. presidential election is coming up, this is not an option for Biden, right?
By the way, suppose that if Mr. Trump would be elected as the president, we can say that there would be big changes in the USA policy toward the Middle East. Well, for example, maybe USA government stop their military aid, provide military aid to Ukraine, and then also they do not want to escalate the tensions in the Red Sea area. And then, so as a whole, I think Mr. Trump could be a number one factor changing the USA policy toward the region. But for the Biden, actually, to be elected as a president, he should show the power of USA. So to be elected, I think he used this one as one of the way to strengthen or improve the popularity, strengthen the position as a candidate for the President of the United States. So there is another possibility that maybe USA will keep on taking back hardline policies in dealing with this, the region. So on the short-term basis, USA will show some quite hardlining policies, but not too much. They certainly draw the line, which they don't want to get crossed it, because they do not want to the escalation, the tension in the region, because the USA are involving in the war, 2 wars, right? Israeli-Hamas war, and then the Ukraine and Russia, even though the USA is that directly does not directly involved in, but there's high tensions in Taiwan and the relations with China. There could be another threat to the USA. So certainly USA will refrain themselves from involving in the more war affairs. So, but certainly they just try to take the hardlining the policy, particularly President Biden, to make the image that strong America in some sense.
That's your point. Now, Dr. Hehir, our focus until now was mainly on conflicts in the Middle East, but let's move on to Ukraine. So, Russian President Vladimir Putin had a 2-hour interview with a conservative U.S. media personality, and it was aired last week. Now, how did you see Putin's remarks, and why the interview right now?
Well, the interview was conducted by Tucker Carlson, who is, very much representative of a particular type of thinker, if you want to call him that, in the United States. It's been a phenomenon for the last kind of 10, 15 years in America that certain conservatives have looked to Russia and seen something there that they like. They like the idea of the strong man. They like the idea of kind of conservative family values, patriotism, maintaining domestic order, all these kinds of things. And a superficial look at Russia for these people suggests that it has something the United States has lost. So Carlson himself is obviously not an intellectual and knows very, very little about international relations or history, but he is plugging into that brand within America that sees something they like in Putin. Now, in terms of the actual interview itself, anybody who sat through it, a very long, rambling, incoherent overview of Russian history given by Putin, which is used to try to justify Russian action in Ukraine, but patently doesn't make any sense. To go back 800 years in history to justify the invasion of Ukraine 2 years ago, is almost madness. Many empires have emerged and they don't still claim jurisdiction over the territories they used to own 200, 300, 400 years ago. There's obviously no legitimacy in that basis. The other thing, of course, is the extent to which this conflict is ongoing and moving towards a phase now where it's difficult to see how there can be any resolution that doesn't involve Ukraine being asked to give territory to Russia. And that is really one of the looming debates that's going to be had. Putin, like Netanyahu, has put his entire political career into this particular initiative. He's not going to simply pull back his troops. So he will want to lead with some kind of face-saving exercise, which therefore means he will ask for some Ukrainian territory. And given the way the West is at the moment, and like I said before, with the US election year, it seems likely that Ukraine is going to be pressurized into ceding some of its territory to Russia. And when that happens, I think that will be, a hugely important moment.
All right. Now, Professor Shin, now after seeing such an interview by Putin, Biden and German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, they reiterated the importance of supporting Ukraine. But as we all know, Biden administrations keep failing to have this funding package for Ukraine pass. So based on that, will constant aid for Ukraine be possible?
I think so. As you know very well, since the outbreak of the Russian and Ukraine war, USA has been the largest supplier of the military assistance to Ukraine. But at the moment, the help is on hold because of the at the Congress.
Right.
There are some objections, to pass the bill, providing military aid package, to Israel and Taiwan and Ukraine. Actually, there was $95.34 billion bill. But this is one side. And another side is the USA government and the European Union officially, they said that they will keep on providing the military aid to the Ukraine. Very recently, there was a bipartisan a delegation of U.S. Congress. I mean, they paid visit to the Kyiv to meet the President Zelensky, and they sought to assure, give their assurance to they do part role to pass the bill in the USA Congress. So officially, USA and European Union empathize that they will keep their stance, constantly to provide military aid to Ukraine. But on the other side, as I said before, some politicians and then many civilians started to have the different opinions about the policy providing the military aid to Ukraine continuously. I cannot remember the exact figure, but there is the public survey in the UK. More than 0.5% of the people said no to keep on providing the military aid to the Ukraine. Certainly, there are some different opinions the making inside USA and Europe. And then another point is that the war is at stalemate. After the massive the Ukraine attack to get recovery of their lost territory from Russia, the operation could not be very fruitful, make the fruitful results. Right. So the war is at a stalemate. And then, as Professor, he added some explanation already. If the situation continues, certainly the Biden administration and the European countries' administration will face some different opinions coming from the people. So this will be one of the reasons why we can say that maybe there will be some change in the policy to support Ukraine, not only in USA and the European countries. If I add one more thing, the presidential election in the United States, Mr. Trump officially said that why we have to spend so huge amount of money to provide the military aid to the Ukraine. That means if the Trump is re-elected as the president of the United States, certainly there will be big changes in the USA government policy. Supporting military aid to the Ukraine can be changed.
Oh, right, I see. Now, Dr. Kahir, I believe this to be our last question. Meanwhile, Switzerland said it asked China to participate in the Ukraine peace process. Now, how do you see the possibility of Xi Jinping giving his backing?
Well, Ukraine has also extended an invitation to China and personally to Xi Jinping to attend the peace negotiations. It is obviously a conflict that China has keen interests in. I think in the initial phases, China would have preferred if Russia won the war quite quickly. But as the war has gone on, it is it has an impact on food and energy prices, which obviously is of a great concern to the Chinese economy. It has also strengthened, in some respects, NATO. NATO has grown, has got new members in the course of this particular invasion of Ukraine, which again is something that China would worry about. So China does have a significant interest in bringing a resolution of this conflict quite quickly. It's worth remembering in the early phases as well, China essentially told Putin not to use any nuclear weapons and said it wouldn't support Russia if it did that, and that appears to have worked. So China definitely has influence over Russia, but at the end of the day, it comes back to that point that we've both made now. I think that there doesn't seem to be a clear end game that brings us back to the position we were before Russia's invasion. I don't think China will put pressure on Russia to withdraw all its troops, which is what Zelensky wants, obviously. So we're back to that point about the stalemate and how the West and China will try to put pressure on Ukraine to accept some kind of a settlement that essentially gives some of the country to Russia, which could result in a significant backlash within Ukraine itself and obviously within the West too against any appeasement of.
All right, I see. So it will have influence, but we'll have to wait and see what decision it makes. All right. Well, unfortunately, this is all the time we have for today's edition. Thank you, Professor Shin and Dr. Hee here for your time and insights today. We really appreciate it. All right, that's all for Within the Frame tonight. Thank you for watching and goodbye.